I would like to call to order the Boylston Regional School Committee. I'd like to start with pledging allegiance. Flags over here. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. As always, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. We're back in the media room, so we'll try to, from a communication perspective, hopefully it'll get a little bit better sound, a little bit better visibility than we had last week for those who are going to watch the recording. We apologize if there's any challenges. If there's any questions from anybody who watches at home, please feel free to reach out either using our school committee email addresses or the parent inquiry email address always provided. In the public comment section, we did not receive any preliminary public comments, and I'm not seeing any in the audience tonight. So we will move through our public comment section. Okay. Approval of payable warrants. Those look like the staff will be making its way around. So we're good from that perspective. Moving through the agenda. Okay. Consent agenda has a number of items on it today. Could I please have a motion to approve our consent agenda as presented? Okay. Any questions, concerns, discussion on the consent agenda? Okay. All those approved? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Motion passes. Communication segment. So I have a section of things and a few communications. First, welcome Julie Lee, who was appointed last meeting and is sitting at our first meeting, and goodbye. You're gonna be awesome. Who you kidding? You're gonna be awesome. But all right. Second piece of information to share is about myself. So I submitted my resignation last week. My last meeting will be my last day, official day will be the day after our August meeting. So the plan currently right now is for myself to continue to chair, obviously, this meeting and our August meeting. This is going to change some of our agenda moving forward, and I'll get to some of that. A few reasons for the resignation. Obviously, my time on here has been extremely awesome, and I feel extremely fulfilled and accomplished in what I wanted to do joining committee. Lots of things have changed over my life in the past year, as of many. So my children will be making some different decisions moving forward. I want to help and focus them on that. Some of my priorities personally have shifted, which don't allow me to necessarily put the time and effort I believe the role and the position of the committee deserves. And then just feedback from the community about others who are interested. I think there's a great group of folks out there who are interested and want to participate. So I think it's a great time to let some of those folks take a step up and play a role. So I look forward to, working through the process and helping. I've spoken to Susan, the vice chair, about how we're going to kind of handle things moving forward. So a couple of things to think about. One, Christy will be releasing on the website and other ways the open seat. So we'll start collecting the resumes and interest for that perspective, with the intent that we'll be doing our interviews and appointment on August, and I'll play a role in that, with the intent that that person will then take a seat in September. What we're going to do from an agenda standpoint, we're going to put off any of our election of the reorganization of the seats and the appointment of subcommittees. Two reasons for that. I'm going to work with the vice chair, and what I'm going to do is specifically reach out to all of you between now and the August meeting, and I'm going to help Susan put us in a good position to determine who's the right person to sit as chair, vice chair. Think about some of the things going forward about interest in these positions as you move forward. Where's the best place to gain that knowledge? It would be really cool to see someone who has interest in being chair someday take and see the vice chair with the intent that maybe moving into chair at some point, right, and learning about that. Some of the things I've learned, and Susan and I even back to the days of Cliff that we've talked about, is really building capacity from a school committee perspective, putting people in a place where we can have people to fill in and step up and be ready to go. I think it's important that we allow people to sort of see and experience some of the things like agenda meetings and some of the things the chair does. So I think some of the goals moving forward will be to get a number of people involved in some of those things to help build capacity and prepare those for those folks, in the future. So as it relates to the agenda standpoint, we're going to move items A and F off, A through F off the agenda. Like I said, we're going to do reorganization in August, and then subcommittees following in September with new programs that are on. But everybody should be thinking about kind of what they're interested in moving forward and that type of stuff. Okay, another update from a communication perspective. So I committed to making updates on elections moving forward. We haven't made great progress from a school committee perspective. I worked with Russ, like I mentioned last meeting. We rewrote the legislation. It's been sent to both towns. I'm waiting for an update from Boylston. Haven't got one yet. Berlin Select Board has asked that we go and discuss with them the intent and the reason for the potential special election. We've been kind of going back and forth. It has some conflict in terms of dates of their meetings because town meetings are happening and stuff that I had going on. So right now we're tentatively targeting their June 28th meeting. I think I would like, and I can reach out to other people after, if there is a member from Berlin or multiple members of Berlin who want to attend. I think we're better as a group than we are individually. Obviously, I'm going to stick it through as long as I can to help put the committee in a good position from an election standpoint when I leave. So I'll be attending the meeting. And then what we can do is kind of determine from there where we're going to go. So I think, obviously, with me moving on, it would be good for having somebody else there as well who was part of the meeting and discussion, just in case it needs to be discussed, when we move forward. Right? So that's the update from an election standpoint. One last agenda item change is that you'll see on the agenda we have an executive session on it. We don't need our executive session. Jeff's contract is what it is, meaning from the sense that his evaluation triggers the point that's already in his contract as it relates to any type of compensation. So there's no discussion really around compensation. The discussion is all about the evaluation of what that summative evaluation will outcome. So what we're going to do is, from a vote perspective, we'll do those right after, during the report section. So we'll kind of keep that all together so it's nice and clean. We're not going to do the votes during business session. We'll do them right after. Okay. All right. So that's all I had from a communication standpoint. Any other members? Bob?
Question.
Yep.
Angela resigned, so we don't currently have an assistant treasurer.
Yep.
We should over the summer. We also takes time to get that person signed up to get signature authority in bank accounts on checks. So I was wondering if you would consider appointing that position this meeting since we don't have one.
Yeah, absolutely. So Bob, can you just give for maybe Mike and Julie, maybe just a kind of quick idea of what that role entails?
The most important thing is that you're readily available and accessible to sign checks. Typically, it's not that often. It's very infrequent, but when it does happen, it's important that we can pay vendors. The role of the treasurer is different than the business manager for separation of responsibilities. I prepare all the warrants, but I shouldn't be the one signing the checks, so the state has that rule that we have a different treasurer. That person is Joe Michaelbeck, who's our regular treasurer. He's a part-time person. And we should have an assistant treasurer. Each district should have an assistant treasurer, and that's in a lot of districts' cases, a school committee member. And I've had to contact Angela maybe twice a year to sign something. So it is infrequent, but somebody who's typically going to be accessible in the area, not somebody who's traveling for work a lot.
Okay, thanks, Bob. So first, I will ask, do we have a volunteer for it? I'm going to appoint somebody ain't going to be happy.
Jim, I volunteer. I do travel for work a little bit. I'm might travel to work if we ever get back to that.
Well, if someone's traveling, they can preemptively tell you they're traveling, right? We have a backup plan for that, or we do not?
No, we can't create backup signatures, we can't have a third person signature for it.
Well,
They are the
Yeah.
person.
yeah,
right?
I mean, essentially, though, anybody has the potential to travel at any time, so I don't wanna, I mean,
That's okay. I don't know.
I have signed stuff, scanned it.
Yeah,
It's COVID, I don't know if
that's with the warrants. I mean, I think that would be fine. It ties in.
All right, why don't we do this? What's the title? Assistant treasurer, correct?
Assistant treasurer.
I'm gonna appoint Mr. Topman as assistant treasurer. We'll start with that. If we come across any challenges or you run into any time when you think you're gonna have we can always reappoint somebody else. That's fine.
Okay,
All right, so we'll start from that perspective. Okay?
thank you.
All right. So appointed. Here we go.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Other communications, anyone?
No, it's emailed to all of you.
Okay. Oh, well, was that the one today?
No, it was June 12th.
Okay. Do you want to share that? I don't.
Oh, we just received an email from a resident of Bellingham about cautions about COVID clinics in schools for students 12 and up. Lots of links.
Great, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for you sent that. Any other communications?
Jim, can I just say one thing? Today we had a middle school field day.
Yep.
Julie and I were both there during the day, and so we got to see it in action. And it's really a big thanks goes to Marie Phillips and Tricia Epp, who organized the whole thing, and it ran so wonderfully. I mean, the skies opened up, and then they didn't, and then they opened up again, and they rolled with everything, and the kids had such a great time. It was well organized, and it was really just nice to have it. So it was a lot of work for those ladies and all of the volunteers who also helped out. There were so many volunteers here and behind the scenes. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, obviously, both, everybody who volunteered. I saw everybody setting up this morning. I said to myself, oh, boy. What a day for that.
Just to piggyback on that, I attended graduation on Sunday, which was a grand affair and very well executed also. Really well planned for a very hot day out in the middle of the field, and it just went off without a hitch. It was a celebratory, exciting event. We were all very happy for these students who got to finally have these like benchmark experiences and to close out their high school year. So congratulations to everybody who contributed to the success of that event.
Yeah, thank you for attending that too, as well.
It was an honor.
I saw some pictures up there, you and Jeff handing out those diplomas, you guys killed it up there. Good. And on that too, I attended this year, both, just from a child standpoint, I attended the 8th grade recognition. Most of it was online virtually, but then as well today in 5th grade, at least from a Boylston PES perspective, I attended the 5th grade recognition. Fortunately, it was a parade today because of the weather. But congratulations to all the 8th graders, as well as both 5th grade, all the 5th grade classes at PES and BMS as well. So good luck to all of you as they move up.
And all the staff tomorrow.
Yes. And whoever was wearing the Bobcat costume in the rain today, good for you. I don't know who it was. Oh, that's right. And happy birthday to our superintendent, Mr. Zhang. That's right. Yes. Should we ask him how old he is?
Are you? Great. Oh, it's a big birthday. You should
Oh.
not be
No,
here.
70 is the big one.
Oh, it keeps changing the older you get.
Man, I could think around 60, I'd be happy now. Good stuff. Well, happy birthday.
I'm sorry you're here.
Well, we agree on that.
All right, moving through, our agenda. Okay, first thing, item, G, appointment of Superintendent Zangi to the Aspen Valley Collaborative Board of Directors. Any comments on that, Jeff, before you are so appointed?
No, comes with the job.
Correct. All right, so appointed, Jeff. And as well, item number H, the appointment of Christy Turgeon as the member of central office to be copied in all school emails. I think we already did that. I think that was just covering everything for the organization, right? Okay, thank you. We'll just keep it going. Yeah, it's all good. All right, so we're moving into the report section of our agenda. First, obviously, item on the agenda is our superintendent evaluation. So, from a process standpoint, bear with me, I just kind of want to make sure we're all on board on the same page, kind of how this is all going to go. Like I mentioned earlier, votes will take place after we're done with this report and section. There's no reason to kind of move it along. We'll just make sure we accomplish all that and anything from that perspective. From a processing standpoint, I'm going to read, take a few minutes to read sort of a summative opening introduction. Some of it was extremely well written by Susan and Lori. And first of all, thank you both again, obviously, for all the hard work and time you guys put into this. I can tell you, so I've wrapped up 4 years now, and I can tell you, even just in 4 years, the strides that this process has taken. We were in these like crazy documents 4 years ago, and it's just, you guys have a tremendous amount of work and time that went into this, and collaborating and pulling this all together to make it the efficient process it is today is just amazing. So kudos to you both for doing that. So I'm going to read a quick sort of introduction. Some of it is just going to be verbatim from maybe what you've already read, but I'm reading it from the public standpoint. I'm going to highlight a couple of I'm going to quickly highlight some of the comments, both good and bad, that were shared during some of this. We're not, obviously, I'm not going to read the entire thing. When I'm done with an introduction standpoint, I'm going to ask Jeff if he has any comments or questions that he would like to ask the members or anyone as it relates to the evaluation. That's his right to do that, and we do that in public. Us as a group, from a deliberation standpoint, we won't do any discussion or deliberation until our motion's been made. So when Jeff is done with his questions or comments, so in response to Jeff, all responses should be directed to Jeff. So if he asks us a question, our responses are directed to Jeff. They're not intended to be discussion between committee members yet at this point. Okay, it's communication with Jeff and the committee members. Again, it can be great to step in. Don't feel like you can't respond and share anything and discuss. I don't want it to feel like it's that formal. Once Jeff's completed any questions or comments that he has, we will move. I'll ask for a motion. I'll ask for a motion to vote to accept the final report as is. Okay. How that will go will be, that's just the motion. I'll need a second, and then questions, concerns, deliberations, we'll deliberate. Any changes that maybe Jeff has that we agree to, or changes, amendments that we want to make as a group, if there are amendments, we'll make that amendment, the motion for the amendment while we're in our motion. Okay? And then when we're done, we'll vote on our motion and the accepted amendments. Okay, that's the first step. And then what we'll do is, and then what we have to do is agree on our rating for Jeff, our overall rating for him. And then I'll ask in the second comment, I'll ask for a vote to the committee's overall rating. Whatever rating we determine and agree to as a group, that has to be stated as part of that vote. So, for example, if we agree that Jeff should deserve a proficient rating, it would read something as, could I have a motion, please vote on committee's overall performance rating of proficient in the superintendent's performance evaluation for this year. Anybody have any questions from that perspective? Okay. All right, so from introduction standpoint, this supplemental evaluation report compiles 6 individual superintendent evaluation reports submitted by the members of the Berlin-Boylston Regional School Committee on May 14th, 2021. The purpose of this report has two purposes. First is it provides a rich source of feedback to the superintendent as part of an ongoing improvement cycle, and thus should inform reflection on the current year's efforts as well as goal setting for the upcoming school year. Second, the report provides the basis for the school committee's deliberations and decisions regarding its evaluation of the superintendent's performance, which is tied by contract to the superintendent's salary. Following receipt of this report, the Berlin-Boylston Regional School Committee will discuss the compiled evaluation results in a public meeting, striving to understand committee members' varied perspectives and to reach consensus on the superintendent's overall performance rating. The committee then records two votes, the two votes that I've already discussed. Thus, this report, as presented here, does not represent the committee's final deliberations or decisions and may undergo revisions before it's accepted by the school committee. A couple of things I want to make mention. We had a number of changes in school committee seats and positions over the last year. We had a school committee member who was on the committee until December, who had an opportunity, if he wanted to provide his evaluation and his feedback. He chose not to. We had a school committee member who joined from January, whose evaluation is from January to May, and that portion is reflected as their evaluation from that period of time. And that person will vote and evaluate based on their period of time on committee. And we have a committee member who's joined as of today, who will have an opportunity to evaluate, do not have to do from a formal evaluation, but has an opportunity to vote and discuss, and will participate in deliberations to the extent possible that they have, okay? So, four school committee members rated the superintendent's overall performance 2021-22 as proficient, while the remaining two members' evaluations fell on either side with ratings of needs improvement or exemplary. So, what I quickly want to read is committee members' comments pertaining to overall performance suggest that the superintendent's leadership thrived despite a year filled with unprecedented challenges and change. While perspectives on goal attainment differed, the committee's consensus was that Mr. Zangi always advocated for the varying needs of the students, staff, and district, keeping at the forefront their safety and well-being. He was commended for unifying stakeholders, treating all with respect, and for sometimes putting his personal opinion aside to ensure the district's progress. So what I want to make sure is discussed today when we go into deliberations, right, when Jeff is reviewing his evaluation, right? Some of the, it's important to take the good, for lack of better terms, keep it good with the bad, right? Take the constructive piece as not criticism, but as constructive, right? And to make sure that we evaluate not only the positive pieces of the evaluation, but also those constructive pieces of the evaluation, right? So I want to share just a couple of things that folks said, both on the positive side as well as on the constructive side. Committee members noted the superintendent worked respectfully with a wide range of stakeholders while remaining focused on the best interests of our district's children and staff. Another school committee member wrote, many felt that Mr. Zangi's leadership never faltered in the face of challenging mandates, fluid expectations, and apprehensive stakeholders. As one member noted, the 2021 school year was a continuation of challenges and demands first introduced during the pandemic of the previous year's spring semester. Another member added the demands were oppressive and continue, more often than not, demoralizing, but the superintendent's team provided a steadying force that got students and families through an unforgettable year. Some of the constructive pieces of feedback that we right, so there was some disagreement among members on whether or not the superintendent met his goals or if they were a work in progress. While committee members' comments noted the unusually demanding times, not all agreed to the status of the superintendent's goals. One member stated appreciation that Mr. Zangi prioritized student and staff well-being. However, when reviewing the specific focus and effectiveness measurements of the three goals, it was difficult to rate all as proficient. Another felt goal accomplishment should never be evaluated simply on accomplished or not accomplished, but should be assessed in context. This year, in the context of the pandemic, the person concluded the superintendent's core leadership skills were more important during the pandemic than meeting the benchmarks for goal performance. One member noted, I believe Jeff has the best interests of students and staff at the top of his mind in all cases, but when reviewing the specific focus and effectiveness measurements of the three goals, it was difficult to rate all as proficient. The biggest improvement could come from more, not less, communication to parents and the community through various means. The member went on to talk about the use of social media and in context, have a difference of opinions with Jeff and the use of social media, but the importance around in today's nature and where we're at, the importance of social media, and that's an area that Jeff and the school committee needs to grow. The same member also said, I agree on that the work and presentation skills is needed, a better job can be done to keep school committee meetings more tasked. But disagree that 4 hours a month is too much for the committee and public to get a good sense of direction of where schools are heading. I think community and parent involvement in school committee meetings should be welcomed, not discouraged, especially with circumstances of this past year. So again, it's constructive ideas and thoughts around, and I agree with that, right? When I came on board, and I took, not came on board, but when I took over as chair of the school committee, one of the things, the feedback that I got quite often from previous school committees was that there was a sense of overall management inquiry and quieting and lack of ability to let the public speak. And I said, when I become chair, one of the things I'm gonna do is make sure that everybody has time to speak and everybody's allowed to speak. We're not gonna manage that. Now, sure, could I manage that probably a little bit better? And those are all things we'll learn from. But again, all constructive ideas and criticism, right? Not criticism, but constructive ideas as we move forward through the evaluation. So that's just some highlights from the discussion and from some of the evaluations. Obviously, there's much more to be read there, much more obviously that the rest of the committee digested throughout the process. So with that, I'll conclude my introductory statements. I ask that when we get into deliberations, everybody is courteous and positive and effective, right? The goal here is not to necessarily, I just want to make sure that we will, our goal here is to put ourselves in a position for everybody to grow from a school committee perspective, a superintendent perspective, because at the end of the day, really what's happening is as a team, we need to grow, right? So with that being said, I'll conclude my introduction and I'll ask Jeff if Jeff has any comments and or questions.
I do, actually both. First, I want to thank the committee for supporting me, supporting the leadership team this year. It was been a long 18 months, and hopefully we get off to a different start in September. But I just want to thank you for your support and patience this year. It meant a lot to me, to know that I could count on this committee to support. So. And with that, I do have a couple of questions. I could ask some questions. Yep. On page 6, in the third section down, star section. So the star is a convention we're using to indicate the member who's been here since
January to June, it's a partial year's observation.
Okay, good. On line 4, it says the weekly newsletter is a good start, but oftentimes there's the same static information repeated weekly. Can you give me an example of what static information you're referring to?
Yeah, so I'm the one who's been handling this since January. All my comments to the stars. A lot of the, not specifically yours, but as superintendent, I felt you were sort of the editor or publisher of the newsletter, the sort of leader. A lot of the things, mostly from the business side of it, the school lunch side of it, was repetitive, which I understand being necessary, but some other information could have been thrown in there, especially even around the time when schools were shut down for multiple weeks, around vacations. So that's what
Do you have anything specific?
Yeah, the school lunches, I meant the business sections, they all seem to be pretty static.
Okay, I do want to mention that much of that information was put on there and remains on there at the request of parents who oftentimes don't see the newsletter one week and maybe on vacation, maybe just busy and they don't see it. So that's the, just want to clear that up.
Yeah, that's fair, I understand that.
Okay.
I think what I was looking for here is, this is about communication. With this year being what it was, it's more important than ever, so more information is always better than less, I would say.
After that, so Jeff speaks about the toxic nature of social media. Can you tell me when I've done that?
Yeah, it was right around the April vacation shitstorm that happened with the Facebook page that blew up.
I've said it in public? I've asked Kristen to check all of the minutes of everything I've said in public, and I've never referred to social media as toxic. I referred to it at graduation as being in your face, and I don't remember. And Kristen wasn't able to confirm that I've used that expression, toxic.
If the TOXIC toxic word is an error on my part, I'm sorry. But I think the overall view of it was negative.
Okay, so I didn't say it, I didn't use that one.
Well, I don't know, the minutes don't really have all the detail of every conversation we have, so I can't be sure.
Meetings, we have to go to meetings.
I dispute that I've used that word.
Okay.
Third paragraph down, I believe that should be starred also. That's from Mike's.
Those are all the comments in that box
Oh, okay,
are started.
okay. And the second line, it says, you disagree that 4 hours a month is too much for the committee and public to get a good sense of the direction of our schools are headed. What are you disagreeing with? Are you saying that I said that 4 hours is too much?
During the self-evaluation, you were talking about the length of the meetings and how they've gone on, and it was your responsibility to help bring that in, to the effect of not getting off topic or not having lengthy discussions about things.
I made a statement of fact that the meeting, Zoom meetings only were 1.5 to 2 hours. I never said anything about 4 hours a month being too much for the community or for any of our meetings.
The Zoom meetings that I was a part of, from January to the last 2 meetings ago, I think they averaged about 4 hours, so I probably put 4 hours in. But regardless of whatever.
That's not what I said in my evaluation.
Yeah, I think it doesn't say that, you said that.
It does, it says 1.5 to 2 hours.
No, I mean, this statement that you're calling out, but disagree that 4 hours a month is too much, that reference to 4 hours.
Well, I'm asking where it came from.
Yeah, but he's not saying that you said 4 hours a month.
Well,
I'm not sure where he
That was
he's saying-
above
he's
I mean, we
saying
can go back to the
it's-
tape, but that was above the average length of the meeting, I think, from January, February, March.
That's what he was experiencing.
6:30
I
to,
believe this comment is a response to your overall criticism during your self-evaluation of the handling of meetings during COVID and the lengthy time allowed for parents to speak and the lengthy amount of times. You directly tied, I won't put words in anyone's mouth, but you directly tied the management of meetings to a challenge that you encountered as it relates to meeting one of your goals.
So you're not saying that I stayed 4 hours.
no, what I said was, the meetings have been about 4 hours. And the comment you made, I don't have it in front of me, I'm sure I can find it if we wanted to take the time and increase the length of this meeting, but it referred to the length of the meeting, how they were gone over. And I believe in other conversations we've had, I think from the first day I joined the committee, I was told, normally they're about 2 hours. These ones have gone about 4 hours. It was a reference to that and your self-evaluation, that you should do a better job of reining in the time. And the reason they got out of control was for the public comment going a long time. Sometimes as a committee, no one's particular fault, but it gets off topic on some of the discussions. You mentioned that, I believe. And so it was a reference to that. I don't think one meeting a month for however many hours it is too much to ask for the public and parents and community to get a sense of how the school is going through the school committee.
Okay. Good. Page 11.
And just a second.
Page 11 and the second section. It's on line 11. I don't see enough evidence of including stakeholders in creating a shared educational vision. This is specifically related to my goal of superintendent advisory. How are you defining shared educational vision?
Is that the goal? Correct me if I'm wrong. With the parent
Advisory.
advisory board?
Yes.
I think we had a discussion at the last meeting about that, really.
Maybe you could, I don't remember, did you?
Yeah, someone asked the question of how many parents or from what town, or how many parents from each town were involved in the advisory board. We had gone into a discussion where a lot of members on that committee were taken from other committees or other working groups, and it didn't seem to give a broad enough sort of experience, feedback in the community. If, you know, all these different committees are with the same people, you don't get as broad of a feedback.
So how are you defining it then? So can you define that for me?
Specifically
You
based
said
on what
shared
you said in your
educational vision.
self-evaluation.
Hmm?
Specifically based on what you said in your self-evaluation.
I don't, which is why I never mentioned shared educational vision.
I believe that is part of the, is that part of the rubric?
Yeah, that's part of the language of the standards.
Okay, so the next question is, what about that goal? What about the way that goal specifically was written would make you think that the focus was shared education?
I think
That's a big
specifically-
topic and it's broad.
Yeah, I think specifically in that,
Mostly aimed at school community, so what about the way that goal was written?
I think specifically that goal was written for you to get feedback from the community, and the way your self-evaluation was written, it sounded like most of the meetings that were done with that group was you reporting to that group on whatever was happening in the school. Whereas, from when I read it, I understood that goal to be, you were to listen to the community. The way the self-evaluation is written was more like you were reporting to the community.
Right, okay, so let's get into the shared education. That
Well, shared educational
development,
values,
Shared educational vision.
Shared vision development needs improvement was engage some administrators, staff, students, families, and community members in developing a shared educational vision focused on some aspects of student preparation for college and career readiness, civic engagement, responsible citizenship, and community contributions. The stakeholder engagement is limited or unrepresented. That was the part that got me, where most of the meetings seem to be you reporting to them versus listening to.
It was partly both.
Okay.
I would say that your last line is where the goal is to get perspective from the community. It's closer to what I was trying to do rather than the shared educational vision. And in the box above, I don't know who wrote that, there's a comment that says, I would like to see meeting agendas highlight key questions for the board to respond to, rather than a list of information topics, which feels more like information is being given and less than loose advice being sought. That's exactly what I was going after. So that piece of criticism, I think, will help me a lot, along with another one that talked about defining goals. I think Lori actually addressed that in the last meeting. So, okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Let's see. Page 12. The fifth line down, it says, as for the self-evaluation, I do not agree that allowing the public to speak or facilitating lengthy discussions during school committee meetings is negative. That's okay, but did I say it was?
The tone of your self-evaluation then needs to be.
Where in that, did I said it was negative? I said it was ineffective, and maybe
Okay.
inefficient.
I mean,
I think
ineffective.
it's a stretch.
Ineffective and inefficient, I'd be happy to replace the word negative with that. To me, they're all negative synonyms. Okay.
Inefficient, what were the words you used? Inefficient and
Ineffective.
And further down, you say, do not read your reports verbatim at a meeting, simply present and discuss the major points and reference whatever additional details needed. So, okay, I get the point. It's good advice, except for the final school committee meeting, why I clearly did that so I didn't miss anything. When else have I done this? And you didn't watch the school committee meetings, except to read a final statement. Whenever do you think, or have you seen me just read my entire report.
Most times?
Most times,
Yes.
never.
Okay.
Never. I read two final statements, and I read my evaluation. That's the only time I've read things verbatim.
So the goal
And
is-
if another committee member wants to tell me when I read my report verbatim, I'd like to hear it. I don't do it. Which is why I go off on a tangent, because I don't read them.
I agree, you go off on a tangent. I prefer going off on a tangent because it's more real, it gets more to the heart of the issue. There, in my experience, what I've noticed in the 5 entire meetings that I've been part of, there has been a lot of just reading the report. I think I also put in here that, one of the issues was the length of the meeting, of course. And that's because of the verbatim reading and then discussion after that. We don't get the reports until Friday or sometimes even later for a Tuesday meeting. And if there were more time for the committee to read fully through the report, fully digest it, they would know what it says verbatim by the time the meeting comes, and then a discussion could be had. So this goal was about improving the presentation skills. Part of presentation skills is not simply reading from the screen or reading what's been presented in a report or a paper or a newsletter. Is to make sure that everybody in the audience has that information before the meeting, and then it can be discussed, questions can be asked, maybe highlights can be noted to start with. So that was the nature of this note here.
I understand it, but it's not accurate. I understand your point. It's not that I don't agree, it's just what you're saying is not accurate.
What is not accurate, Jim?
That I read my reports verbatim. It's happened less than five times. I can count.
I mean, I've only been here 5 times, I can only evaluate on the 5 times I've been here. I mean, in the past,
No, less than, I count 3. I read 2 final statements and then I read that. Other than that,
3 out of 5 is 60%.
yeah, well, okay.
I don't know, I've only been here 5 times.
I don't actually see that he says, you read your reports verbatim all the time.
No, it says
It's
do not,
suggest-
which
right,
implies that I
that's a
do.
suggestion though.
No, Susan, it says do not, which implies
I
that I do.
didn't specify a number of reports to be read.
Yeah, he said reports.
Yeah, but this is a suggested comment. Do not, please do not read your reports.
No, I get it's a suggestion. It's based on something I don't do.
Except once.
Yeah, except once.
Okay.
Well, you said 5 times.
He's a big boy. He can defend himself, Susan.
I appreciate Susan's
I think I
comments.
said the same thing in my comment, so, it sort of resonates for me. And yes, it probably was one comment, one time, formally, it might happen earlier, I don't know. I've heard you do it in other years, but it's
Other
not,
years?
it doesn't have to be a common practice to give suggestions for presentation. Right, so it's okay,
Okay,
it's okay.
all right. I'm gonna ask some questions. The questions are directed at him. He should be able to answer without help from other committee members.
Okay.
Is that fair enough?
Yep.
My evaluation?
He's been answering.
Okay.
So let's take a pause for a minute, because what I'll also say is, I would like to ask everybody to respect everybody's, please, opinions and professionalism here. Let's keep this as professional as we possibly can. One thing I like about this process, Jeff, is that it is public, it does allow you to respond. And I'm making a statement, I'm not criticizing anything, I'm saying, all I'm asking for is to, let's just make sure we keep it, as professional as we possibly can. The committee's job is to, as a team, decide, and talk about some of these things when we get to deliberation, so Susan helping and responding is just part of her role as a committee member, so let's just make sure we just.
Jim, he should be answering the questions.
Jeff, I'm happy to answer the question.
He answers.
Not having someone, another committee member, put words in his mouth. I asked him a question, you clearly told me at the beginning that the committee member should direct the question or the answer directly to me. That's what you said.
And that's what he did. He did not make any comments.
I don't ask them, Jim,
So
I to help me with this.
okay, he did not, and Jeff, he also did not ask Susan, okay?
No, I
So you're now putting words in his mouth, because
I'm not saying he did that.
what I'm asking, listen, you're allowed to defend yourself and ask your questions. That's what makes this process possible. That's what makes it the way it is. I'm just asking to make sure we keep this as professional as possible. That's all I'm
He's
asking.
answering my questions, he doesn't need help.
Okay,
That's the
get it.
question.
It's not whether or not, I don't disagree with that. Maybe you would like it, I'm asking for the professional side of things. And just maintain what we're, our decor here, as folks trying to get to an agreement. Right. All I'm
I
asking.
think we should maintain the format established by this year. All I-
Format has been maintained.
Jeff, I respect your opinion, I just don't agree with it. It says, do not read your reports verbatim at the meeting. It does not say, you read every single report verbatim without change every time I've ever been here for the 5 times I have been here, ever. It doesn't say that. It says, as a suggestion for this goal of improving presentation skills, it says, don't read verbatim from the slides from the report. Have the report there for the information, and just speak to that. It was based on your self-evaluation that meetings do go too long, in part because of lengthy reading of reports and discussions.
Okay, I get that. My question is, why if something's done once, why is it relevant enough to be put as summary evaluation? That's my question. If there's a part of a goal and it's done all of the time, or most of the time, or a great majority of the time, then it has enough relevance to be put in a summary evaluation. If it's done once or twice, why is it relevant? Why would it be relevant to be put in a summary evaluation?
Okay, I'll with that. We just had a discussion that maybe you've done it 5 times ever. I've been here, my evaluation is based on 5 meetings. You just discussed maybe you've done it 3 times out of those 5. Okay, 3 times out of that 5 is the majority of the meetings I've been present for that I've had to base my evaluation on. I'm not basing my evaluation on last year or from September to December. It's based on what I experienced from January through May.
Okay, fair enough.
Any comments here? Mike, are you saying that the meeting?
No, stop.
I'm sorry, I can just jump.
Nope, we're not in deliberation, we're in discussion between committee members.
Gotcha.
Until a motion is made and we're in
Deliberation.
If you want to respond to something Jeff said or ask a question of Jeff, you can do that at this time.
Okay, I'll wait for the deliberation.
Thank you. Jeff, any other questions?
No,
Comments,
that's it.
anything else you'd like to address? Any other final comments or questions? For Jeff, Christie, can you just confirm, when we move into deliberation or discussion, if a committee member has a question for Jeff, are we allowed to ask Jeff questions at that time?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to make sure so everybody doesn't feel like they pressure you, if they have a question for Jeff, now they have to get that. That's why Christie said this. Okay, so, with that, what we'll do now is, Susan, you've documented, some of the couple wording changes Jeff would like to ensure is addressed.
I just respond change.
Do we have,
Did you catch any of this?
Yes, I did it. It's all set.
Do you want to review them with us? Maybe, so we all are on the same page for what changes we're voting to amend? Is that right, we accept the amended?
correct, we're doing that, the vote, yes, so, but we will, we're gonna vote. Correct. With the motion to vote as presented right now, then we'll get into our deliberations, and then the final vote, we'll make amendments for the changes as in part of that vote, and then the final vote will be to vote to approve. Once the amendments are made, the ayes and nays will be based on the amendments that are made inside the vote. Thank you. So could I please have a motion to vote to accept the final report as is?
So,
That was Lori. Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Julie, thank you. Okay. Questions, concerns, deliberation? And now we deliberation. Jeff's made a couple of comments and questions that he has. Those changes we will, I will ask for a motion at some point we'll need to make a motion at some point to accept those along with any other changes that we want to make, as a group. Susan, I'll probably need a little bit to help me guide this conversation, but, the way it stands today, so I'll just sort of get the ball rolling. The way it stands right now, we will make a motion to approve Jeff as a proficient rating. So,
I think we're voting on the report,
So we-
accepting the
yep.
report first.
okay, so we can do that. So any other, all right, so, thank you. Any other amendments, updates to the report that anybody would like to make alongside Jeff's changes? Okay, I'm hearing none. So could I please have a motion for amendment to accept requested changes by superintendent?
Yeah, I'd just like to hear them.
Okay, Chrissy, is it possible for you to read those back to us? Do you have those?
Are they in a form you can sign back?
It's in shorthand.
Okay.
Did you write?
I didn't have the page number, but it was that, Jeff, you can help us. Yeah, parent advisory with changing negative,
I think that's
to
page
negative
7.
with inefficient and ineffective. But I don't remember what page that
I think it's
was.
page 7.
Page 7.
It's 7 or 6.
What was the question, Susan?
I'm trying to find where that,
What was the question?
negative, I think it was about the parent advisory, changing the word negative to inefficient and
That was
ineffective.
about the school committee meetings being wrong.
Page 12.
Page 12. That's
I think that's it.
It is a page 12. Yeah. I do not agree to allow the public to speak or facilitate lengthy discussion during a school committee meeting is a negative. I believe it should be encouraged. So we're changing, in page 12,
Start comment.
start comment, we're changing the word negative to
Inefficient and
Inefficient.
ineffective.
inefficient and ineffective. So we will now read, as for self-evaluation, I do not agree that allowing the public to speak or facilitating lengthy discussion during a school committee meeting is an ineffective,
Is
Ineffective
inefficient.
or-
is inefficient or ineffective. Agreed? And
That's
school
fine.
committee member agrees, okay with that?
That's fine with me.
Okay.
I didn't write down the others, so sorry, that's the only one I heard was an official replacement.
I think there was one more on that.
Jeff talked about not using the word toxic, that was just, there wasn't that revision suggested there. And 4 hours a month is too much. That was, he's responding to Mike's comments without any revisions sort of being proposed in. And then his last point about if something is done 1 or 2 times, why is it substantive enough to be in a summative report? And again, it wasn't, that was more of a challenge.
So theoretically, the ask would be to provoke that, but I think that committee member feels confident in his statement based on what his, I think he defended that, saying, would you agree?
I agree.
That you felt good on that? Was there a request, I don't remember, Jeff, was there a request to change the word toxic?
Did not make a request, yeah.
No? Did you make a request to change that?
I just said I didn't say it. If you want to write it in there, I did say it.
Does the committee member want to change the word toxic in, or are you okay with?
I don't believe I was saying he said the word toxic, but.
I don't think you were either,
It's
so
not
I'm just,
in
If you
quotes.
could remind me where it was.
Page 6. It was about social media.
page 6, yep. I've heard Jeff speak about the toxic nature of social media, but in 2021, this is how our community engages and communicates, and it's done well, help eliminate or at least diminish much of the toxicity that may exist.
I'm fine with it.
You're fine with moving it?
No, keep it.
Keeping it?
Okay, so make a motion
I want to, Jeff, you're
Oh, sorry.
comfortable with that one amendment to change that wording?
to accept the report with the one wording change on page 12, changing the word negative to inefficient.
Okay.
I guess all other aspects of the report as submitted.
I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so now what I will do is I should call for the vote now, right, on accepting the proposal, and then we can open up the vote for the rating. Discuss. Susan, correct? So, the new, do we need to amend that motion, or is it just automatically accepted if the amendment was made in the motion?
Are we having the vote now?
So the initial motion is open, okay, on the vote. The motion was open. We made an amendment in there, we voted on it.
I didn't think we.
We haven't
had a
finished,
motion on
yes,
the vote.
we did, we opened the discussion, we have to vote on. We made a motion to open and accept the final report.
Right, which we just.
We then made the changes, we didn't close that, we closed the amendment. Now we need to close the vote for the report. But I don't know if we need to restate it saying. So we'll say, can I please have a motion to vote to accept the final report, including a vote on approved minutes?
So,
Susan moved,
I'll second.
Lori second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Okay. Now, can I please have a vote? Sorry. A motion, do I want to state the rating of this, or are we just going to?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
You make a motion.
For the school committee to, approve the summative performance rating of proficient, the superintendent's performance for 2020 to 2021 school year.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay. Questions, concerns, deliberation? Mr. Lewis, did you have something that you wanted to say?
Yeah,
Question you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I do. I disagree that it was basically what I'm indicating based on the report, that it was basically Jeff's fault that it was 4 hours long. When in fact, we opened it up for comments where, and, you know, it was also said that you wanted more information, and Jeff was providing as much information. This has been a tough year for everybody. So, you know, I've actually, you know, heard of other school committee meetings going 6-7 hours, which was a pretty normal thing around the area. So I guess my comment or question would be, that was taking comments from parents, and they had a lot of questions. Jeff was answering them, and that's why it was 4 hours long.
Yeah.
In a normal year, not COVID, meetings are not 4 hours long. You know, there was questions that needed answered. I felt Jeff did an unbelievable job of providing the information that he was able to do. And so I just gotta say, I completely disagree to blame Jeff for the 4 hour meeting. I mean, I understand the reports that he did, but, I mean, I was at those meetings. Not for 1 second did I think it was because of his reports. Not at all.
And you're looking at me, I don't think
I
I
know,
said
because
that.
you're the one
I
who
don't,
made the comment.
hold on.
I don't think I said that.
No, you didn't. Yes, I would agree with Mr. Tomlin. That was not what Mr. Tomlin said.
Okay, well, that's the way it was indicated in the report, from what I understand. Okay.
Actually, if anything, Mr. Tomlin said the opposite of that, which is he's cool with 4 hours. The more information, better.
Right.
So I think what Mr. Tomlin's
Well, I understand.
responses were in response to Jeff's self-evaluation, because Jeff talked about the
Right.
specifically the management of the meetings and the lengthy time allowed for parent communication and that stuff that, and maybe questions during, I think he was referring to like some of the communication that happened during maybe some of his presentations and stuff, which got his stuff off track, which made it more difficult for him to manage. So it was more of a, I think, an overall statement. Is that accurate? Everybody?
Yeah, Jim, so I appreciate you speaking what you did.
Yeah.
I did not say, or I did not feel that Jeff caused long meetings and that was a bad thing. It was the self-evaluation said, the meetings have gone long, and I think Jeff says in some way, not in particular terms, but something to the effect of, it's my responsibility to do something to bring that in, get more focused with agendas, et cetera. Reading that and hearing him speak at the last meeting made it seem as if the fact that meetings were going longer was a bad thing as it pertains to this goal, and I disagree. If a meeting was 6 or 8 hours during an unprecedented year, where none of this stuff has ever happened in the history of anything we've ever been through before ever, the fact that it was only 4 hours, like Jim said, that's a blessing. If it had gone longer,
I sure understood.
yeah, I think,
My apologies.
thank you.
I understood.
Okay,
I think, first of all, I think it's awesome that everybody read the report. I'm reading closely, I think it's good, and I think that's ultimately good. I think-
I apparently read it wrong.
I don't think you read it wrong. I think it's, again, remind everybody, it's interpretation. This is an evaluation on a personal basis, a personal interpretation of quite a load of data
Yeah.
over quite a period of time during an extremely challenging year, where some of us haven't even met anybody in person yet.
Right.
We're pointing over the thing. So, yeah, it's interpretation, and this process is awesome for the purpose of that, right? So,
So in tandem with that, I think the process is also to build understanding across the committee about the different perspectives that are sitting at the table. So each one of us is going to see and respond to different things from the others, depending on which shoes we fill. And so part of the process is to ask questions and to try to understand, how did that person arrive at that? What did they see? What are they understanding there that maybe different from what I was seeing? But ultimately, at this point in the process, our goal is to arrive at a consensus on the overall rating, which is rolling up all these individual differences of perspective to try to find the cross-cutting agreement, right? Cross-cutting common ground, that's a good word. And so we want to pay attention to the specifics because they're informative. But no single person determines the rating. It's the cross-cutting ground that we recognize that determines the rating. So I just want to remind people of that, that we're seeking, for instance, Jeff is going to learn a great deal from reading at the individual comment level. And he's going to have reactions to that information. He's going to disagree with some of it, and he won't pay any attention to some of it, which is his prerogative. And other comments he is going to pay attention to. He's going to agree with it as he looks at it, or he's going to hear it multiple times across several members of the committee, and that will resonate enough for him to elevate that feedback and think about it more as he sets goals for next year. But our goal, we just have to remember tonight, is not to get embroiled in the specifics, which are really the feedback for Jeff to consider, but to be thinking about where do we concur? Okay, just to bring us up some levels into that overall rating space. Okay, just to remember. It's fine, I'm not trying to squash seeking understanding of the individual comments.
Right.
Just don't want to get lost in that.
We allowed to ask Jeff questions?
yeah, please do.
When you were talking to Mike about.
If you can speak up a little bit, just so that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
About social media, were you referring to people talking badly about yourself?
Talking about the sense.
Sorry. Were the comments that Mike suggested about the toxic thing, about social media, was that specifically, I don't know, I'll ask Mike first, was that about, the negativity towards teachers that weren't given on? Because that's the way I interpret it on social media.
I think it was more a general idea that because social media can lead to so much negative opinions and out of control, just trolls out there saying things that aren't based in fact, as fact, just things of that nature. I think, I might be wrong, but it's my interpretation of what I understand, that there isn't more social media done either from Jeff or from the committee because of that nature. The way things can kind of get out of hand. So I think, it seems in my experience anyway, that the preference is to just make communications either through the newsletter or through another email or enough versus an interaction from social media. So that's what.
Okay.
I think it all, but it's not accurate though. I mean, social media is a broad term. In addition to having the newsletter, which we put in place just a couple of years ago, we've had town hall meetings. We answered 140 questions in 2 hours. We don't shy away from engaging the public. I don't look at Facebook comments about me, that kind of stuff. And I encourage them not to either. But to say that we don't engage the community, we've had 3 town halls in town. We're looking at a way to revamp our website so we can have a mobile application. You wouldn't know this because you weren't here the year before, but so we won't be aware of that. And it's something we put on hold, we'll do it again. But we do a lot of those things. So we don't shy away from that stuff, but we have another job, which is to run the school. So we communicate to the extent we think we believe people want communication. I've had just as many parents say, I had a parent, a couple of them say, there's too much stuff in this, it's just gobbledygook. That's the word they use, long word. So, people vary in what they want, so we try to temper that to give them what we believe they need. And people aren't shy about saying, the scores, for example, the reasons athletic scores are in the newsletter and at the high school level is because parents said, we want to see the scores and we want to see the schedule because we don't know what the scores are. And people are interested in that. We never would have put that in. So we're open to that stuff. The problem I have, Michael, with the stuff you said about communication implies that we don't communicate or that we shy away from it. That's just the opposite. Even at the school levels, they do it on a regular basis. And anybody who has a child in school, especially at the elementary level, because you think, you really need to be on top of that. I don't think parents complain about that stuff. And parents have a big hand in what gets communicated. There's parent volunteers in those schools all the time. So my issue with you isn't the necessarily anything you wrote. It's the feel of it is that we don't like to communicate. Like this the comment, like, more communication is better. We don't disagree with that. We're just saying that we have a school system to run too. And so we communicate messages out, but you made a comment about communication being of the highest priority. Well, we know the highest priority is we should educate the kids and make sure they're safe. We're not saying that we shouldn't communicate with parents, but at the same time, we don't have parents in to tell us how to, what curriculum to adopt and things like that. There is a line. And we involve parents as much as we can in the schools. So we don't shy away from that stuff. And that's the feel I got from that. And that's the stuff, that's what made me angry about this, but I don't agree with what you wrote. And I don't know if you intended that way, but that's how I read it. Now you made a good point. I didn't get to it because we got sidetracked. When you said that you don't feel as an elementary school parent that you get any of the high school stuff. In fact, I don't think that the high school newsletter is sent to everyone. I think it is sent to the elementary school. So I can see just in that comment how someone in the elementary school might not feel like they're connected to the high school until, or the middle school, until they get here, and then it's a big surprise.
Yeah,
So,
I did make that comment, and I think that's something we can probably get into more,
but those are the kind of comments I'm interested, because I can do something with those.
Yeah.
I can't do stuff with some of the other things you go along.
Well, I appreciate you telling me that, but let's remember to focus on, these comments were made in the context of a very specific community engagement and communication goal. They weren't made just in general about the way you run the district. Also, I was only here since January, so all my comments are the stars in there because I was only here from January, so.
Well,
I
I
based
get
my
that. I get
evaluation
that.
from January to now. What's that?
You get a pass on that, no, you do, I mean, you want to want to
So,
show time, I get that.
I mean, the communication talk about, yeah, you had some town halls over the summer, okay? And then it seemed like it was silence, and then there were some closures for certain weeks around vacations. There was, the April vacation situation, I think, is probably the freshest in my mind when I wrote this. You sent out a communication that was fairly general. I know you had to do that because of COVID and health reasons, and privacy reasons and whatnot. But when I talked to you about specific reasons why you did that, then it made sense. But that wasn't what the community got. The community didn't get that information. I got that information. The community did it. Not until I think you eventually said that publicly once school came back. But those are the things that was in my mind when I was writing this.
Well, there's something.
I think
we
the
need to
social
do.
media comments are, I mean, I think I stand by the social media comments.
There are things we can't tell parents, I mean, just like you said, if something straddles the line of privacy, I'm not gonna share it. I always err on that side.
And you eventually did share it, and I don't think it was a privacy concern when you shared it, but it was just delayed by 2 weeks.
Only because it was such an unusual day, for just a couple of students to cause, not to cause, because that, like, they did it. And then, as a result of that, there were, 60 kids out of school. That's a very unusual service, and that's why we did that, because it would
Yeah.
seem like it was, 30 kids had COVID, and that's why that happened, and that wasn't the case. So
I appreciate that it was a unique situation. That's kind of the point of my comment, was because it was so unique and never experienced before, additional detail or communication or something would have been beneficial to prevent all that online panic
Yeah.
and town going nuts.
I don't disagree with a lot of that stuff, but I said it at the beginning of this, it's like we're building the plane when we're trying to fly it. Sometimes stuff would happen, and I don't know any superintendent who's been through it before, so there was a lot of things which you had to think, should I share this or should I? Or, sometimes if your guidance on Friday would change by the next Friday.
Yeah.
But
And I think I put that in there. I think I said, not your fault, local government is too incompetent to get it right to begin with, so how could you get it right? I think I said something to that effect in there, but I think I agree. I understand what you're saying. I agree with it. I'm good with it.
Okay, good enough.
A couple of points. One thing that I'm hearing the SAGE up, and I think this applies to all of us, is to always be bearing in mind in our feedback to make the feedback as useful and constructive for you to apply as possible. So it's not just criticism, but it offers a suggestion or something else to think about, and it doesn't just attribute sort of negative things to you. That's kind of dead-end feedback. So we should always be thinking about how to make our feedback, all of us, useful to you. The second thing is I just want to, for context, put out, because when this evaluation process was designed, it was two-pronged. One was the superintendent's evaluation, and one was the school committee's self-assessment of their own work. And in the design, when we designed this, they were to go hand in hand, so that the school committee would first reflect on their own functioning and get clear on their own performance before they evaluated the superintendent's performance, so that you don't conflate an issue that may rest in the school committee with what the superintendent's performance is doing. So Last year, we had the school committee self-assessment results. We digested that before we digested the superintendent's performance. This year, we weren't able to do that because we had to change the schedule around because of this election stuff. Lori and I have looked at this school committee self-assessment results, and we can just give you a foreshadowing. You'll get to look at those in the fall. But there was one clear area of weak school committee performance identified in that self-assessment, and that had to do with community engagement and outreach. And so the reason I bring that up is to help us not entangle things that we may also be weak in with what Jeff may be weak in, right? So we don't want to get those conflated. We don't want all that to be targeted at Jeff when our own performance in that area is something that we still need to discuss and work on. Now, that's clear.
I'd like to make a comment, sticking on this topic, on this particular value, right? Because though majority of us did fall in proficient training, there was also the other side, exemplary rating as well, which I'll say was made, I rated them exemplary. The interesting part is that I 100% agree with both of them. 100% agree with the need for more communication, 100% agree with the challenges of social media. Because of that is why I rated them exemplary. Because the hardest thing to do in the world of social media is not respond. It is by far the hardest thing to do in the face of criticism, and particularly on social media, is to not respond. And that takes a cool, calm, and collected approach to understanding, evaluating. You know, what people don't know is, and we'll use the example that you used, that April vacation and all the stuff that went on, right? What a lot of people didn't know was just all of the continued research and understanding and tracing and tracking that had to take place during that time, right? So the ability to deliver effective communication right out the gate was going to be a challenge. So he had to manage that in a way that wouldn't create panic, but at the same time provide enough information so that individuals could make informed decisions for their own students, which at the end of the day is the most important part. Being given the information that allows you as a parent to make an informed decision for your student, right? Hence all of the continued social media, to mention the emails and everything that he gets and all that good stuff, all which leads to, most of the time, inaccurate information, which then comes out, right? It's a challenge because parents want that stuff back. So I looked at it in a different way, Mike. I looked at it in a way as, actually, I don't know that there was a right way to respond to it. So he had to make an educated response to it, which allowed more people to make more informed decisions and make the students. So when I looked at that, I said, holy crap, pardon the use of the word crap. Like, that's a really tough position to be in. Like, think about that. We saw some of the emails, we probably did see some of this. We read the Facebook back to school, blah, blah, blah. Up until that point, I hadn't even joined that group. And then that stuff came up and I said, oh boy, I gotta get in this group. I had kept myself out of it for so long. And so, in my opinion, I felt like that was a really, really challenging position to be in, along with the rest of the pandemic and that type of stuff. So when I see, but I completely agree, and that's the tough part about these things, why it's an opinion-based, informative, just evaluated, right? Based on what you're seeing, you see it differently, he sees it differently, I see it a little bit differently, right? So I just felt like when we look at the two aspects of that, like I wanted to share how I looked at that type of stuff, right, during some of the challenging times. So it's just interesting. I think that's the important thing that we take from these evaluations is pulling out of it what Jeff can use to inform his goals and how he grows, moving forward, right? But we can't forget that we are evaluating and it is tied to pieces of Jeff's, personal, stuff. So, okay, that's all I wanted. I was just a comment. I just wanted to share.
Yeah.
Right, because I thought it was good context there. Okay, well, we focused on you a lot for your, and I felt like that wasn't fair. I should share why I went the other way, right?
There's a couple of things that you said that I'd like to, first,
Yeah.
the exemplary versus proficient versus other ratings. Before this process even started, Susan and Maury both met with me to sort of go over what I was to expect, right? And they sort of discuss the different ratings and, you know, what sort of qualifies for each rating. And for the example, the way she kind of correlated things was exemplary, proficient was, you know, that's what you should do, that's what's expected, that's what you should strive to. Exemplary was something that is a completely new way of thinking of things. It's something you would want to model, take around to the different conferences and speak to it and try to train other districts on it. So when I was coming up with my ratings, that's what I had in my mind. Exemplary is something that, oh my God, this is groundbreaking stuff. We've got to share this with the world. Proficient is, yeah, you know, that was really good. We strove to get there. It was a really hard thing to do, so on down the line. So that's what was in my mind when I was going through the grade, just that one. The other part with, I forget what you said that made me trigger this in my mind to think about it, but, you know, back to communication and some things you can't communicate because of privacy with kids and health issues and everything. And I called Jeff about this back when it happened, but it was around the same time of taking vacation. I don't remember exactly what it was. I asked him why more information didn't come out about the COVID situation cases in the school, and why it led to the actions that it did lead to. And it was, you know, we can't tell everybody when there's a case because that's privacy and all that. And then shortly after that, like within a day or two of hearing that from Jeff, I got a letter as an elementary parent from the elementary school saying that there was a strep case in the school building. So my question was then, why can we announce to the community that there's a case of strep throat, which is a health issue, but we can't do it when there's COVID, which is just a health issue as well? Not to downplay the severity of COVID, but there are two health issues, two privacy issues. So there was a little bit of sort of inconsistency there in that.
I'll respond to your first feedback first, and I'll just say, personally, from my own perspective, and I'm just speaking for myself in terms of response, that's exactly how I would look at it in enrollment there. I took the approach this year, putting it under the concepts of pandemic, watching the news, watching the way other districts are handling things. Some better, some good, I won't say we were the best, but some a lot worse as well, too, right? So when I looked at it this year, I put it in a different context. That's just from my own personal, right? That's how I look at it. So that's kind of how I didn't fit. The second piece, I remember that. I remember you saying, I don't know if there's an answer to that. Nor do I think we should go down that.
Yeah, I don't want to
How to get into that thing, but I know what you're saying. And again, those are things I think for Jeff's feedback, it's important. Like, that's a great example, right? With Jeff's feedback, let's just make sure we remain consistent in communication, right? So that everybody understands, we can remain consistent about different things and not one time say one thing, one time say another, right? So I think those are things that, you know, part of these communications Jeff should take on, right? I remember, I know exactly what you're talking about. I don't think we had an answer for that either, so it's interesting. Yeah, but any other comments, questions?
No, I just think the report has a lot of very positive feedback. Unfortunately, we spent a lot of time discussing some specific critical feedback, but there is a lot of very positive feedback in this report about Jeff's leadership style, his calmness, and his very steady leadership during a very unsteady year. And I think that's cannot be underappreciated. And that he also worked respectfully with a wide range of stakeholders who all had deep investments and a lot of emotions running and a lot of changing context all around throughout the year. And I just feel like this is the leadership that we needed this year. I think he was a really good fit for our district this year, and that he was very successful in guiding us through a very difficult time. And I personally am appreciative of that. And again, I think I'm ready to move the question on how great of proficient, which which is considered by the state to be a rigorous, high-achieving rating.
Any other concerns or comments about moving forward the vote of your petition? Hearing none? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Nay. One opposed, Morgan? Thank you. Okay. All right, Jeff, I apologize, but now you have to go back to the originally scheduled program. And I must ask you to move forward with your traditional superintendent.
All right. Just like to read this.
I'm gonna make it, if anybody feels like they're struggling, if anybody else feels like they're struggling talking during something, I think it's okay to put your mask down while you're speaking. I think that's okay. Hold down while you're speaking.
I want to, so, well, first of all, Jim, I want to say your compliment, your comments about the exemplary. I try to find flaw with them, but I absolutely can't, so we'll leave it at that. On a serious note, I think I can speak for the leadership team and say that we're going to miss you. We're going to miss your leadership, and I certainly will miss our monthly meetings. We didn't always agree, but we always found the middle ground. Every time we spoke, anytime we didn't disagree, it wasn't often. But I think you've been a great school committee member and a great chairperson. And I think the leadership team's going to miss you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
COVID testing. So this year, there's been a lot about the COVID testing. There's been the pool testing. About 25 to 30% of the districts did do it. We never got involved with it. We didn't think we had some accuracy issues that we just didn't want to get involved with. And we knew that at some point it would go away, it would be a cost to the district. But one of the things we always thought, if it happened, would be a sort of diagnostic test, a take-home test that you can get the students to take home. And there was a couple of things we thought about. One, if we could have an at-home test that could reduce the amount of time a student who was quarantined had to be home. And we don't know what that's going to be. It's 10 days now. It could be nothing next year. And then the other thing is, as COVID starts to diminish, the testing sites will start to go away. It will not be as easy to get a COVID test. So that's something we always thought we would look for. And the state just last month announced that they would have at-home testing that you could get involved with that program free of charge. So we did. We started getting these at-home tests. And so what we will do is if the student is quarantined, not if they're positive, but if you get sent home because you've been exposed to someone who is positive, you get this test that you can take home, you can administer it on the morning of day 7, and if it's negative, you come back. Now, originally what they said was you take it once when you get home, we give them 2 tests, once when you get home, and then once they can do it in the morning of day 7, they get 2 negative tests, they can come back to school. There's variations of that, so we'll see what that looks like in the fall, but certainly in the morning of day 7, they take this test. They're positive, they're negative, they come right back to school. So it saves, 2 things, it saves them 3 days from having to be home. And it also saves the parent the trouble and time of trying to find the testing site or get any of that done. So we're going to try it. They didn't send us, we said 250 tests, and I think they just laughed when Christy said that. So we did get us to send, we have 36 right now, and it's a pretty quick turnaround. So you order them, we have them within a day or so. But we're also looking into the company. We contacted the company who actually makes this. We're going to see if we can purchase enough so that we can have, them on hand at the school. I'm still a little shell shocked about the 60 kids that had to leave at one time, this incident that Mike was talking about, which we would have never had the amount of tests. But typically, that's not what happens. It's 5 kids, 6 kids. We would have enough tests to give them, and then we'd call the state, get more. They originally only sent us 12 away, but with the build number, how did you get 12? We go by how many you report, so they looked and they said 2 kids, and then they sent 12 tests, and this isn't gonna work. So, that'll be for the fall, we're gonna try to see how it works, hopefully we never need them, but again, we think it's gonna be a convenience for the families and, a way to get the students back in school a little bit earlier. Any questions about that? I haven't opened it, I wanna go back to the test and short on it, so.
Do they expire?
I don't know if there's an expiration on here, but, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But they did say, if you run out, they said, they showed us not to worry. It was the first thing I did was worry that we weren't gonna get them. So that's why we're gonna try to stockpile some. So that if they do expire, that might be a fly in the ointment, but we'll look into it. It's a good question.
That will continue to evolve with state guidelines,
Excuse me?
That will continue to evolve with state guidelines as state guidelines change.
This is new. They didn't have this program, so
But in terms of timeframes, if the timeframes in terms of return testing changes via state guidelines. that
yeah, I
will-
mean, certainly, if they said something like if they go and get the test and it's negative, and that's the new guidance,
Okay.
it's still 10 days, well, let's say they said, okay, if you get a negative test, you can come back. They can just take it home and do the test that day and come back. We would even be able to send them in a room and administer it. It's, I think it's called the soft test, so they'll have to put it way up there, which is very uncomfortable. I think it's just in the front of it. But they call it the soft test. So I don't think it's as intrusive.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so, the other thing, I was gonna table it, is the return to school week in the fall. We're supposed to get, the last update was on the 27th, May 27th, and we're supposed to get additional guidance regarding masks within the next couple of weeks. So we'll be watching for that, but, I will say this, that the commissioner so far has said that, he's planning full return in the fall with no remote learning. So all in person, so that's what we're gonna plan, not have a remote program. So that, I don't think that's gonna change unless there's a spike. I would say that we will be in school full. And, I also think the social distancing guidelines will be, eliminated. That I'm not sure about, but the guidance will be out, within the next couple of weeks. So, we'll wait, we'll send it out probably midsummer and then send it out again. Parents can get it, and we'll do some presentation. Probably, August, early August.
I just want to ask a question. I know you would have to run it past the teachers and see how they felt about it, but I just want to kind of put it out there because I've had some people come up to me and say, I really hope this happens. Is that, would we consider possibly not having snow days? Because there was always like a remote packet in there, and it's because of parent interest that I'm bringing it up. I don't know if it would be beneficial or not, but it is really nice if the kids are getting out June 15th. Not so much for Tohoto. I mean, it is wonderful because you get more summer. But Tohoto has a geothermal, so it's nice and cool in here, but those elementary schools are toasty. So the earlier date is so nice, that's the only reason why I bring it up. Well, that and parents.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a good question. Well, two things related to that. One, originally, this is before COVID, the commissioner, the former commissioner had what they call the blizzard bag, which is essentially the same thing. And then because of, he didn't believe that special education students were able to access education during that time. During the blizzard bag was implemented, like a stay-at-home, that he did away with, and now with COVID, he's allowed us to do it. Because the technology's changed, and now we've had a year to sort of learn how to do remote, which wasn't the case before, so some communities really couldn't do that. So And at the last commissioner update, he did say, somebody asked a question, he just laughed. He said, well, we'll look at it next year. So, but we're really hoping for it. And so originally, if you remember, when we talked about it, when we started it, we were gonna do the pilot, and then he said, no. We had a committee together, and, there was a couple parents on, there was a kid on there, a student on there, and some teachers. We started getting it together. And the way we were gonna do it was gonna be, it wasn't gonna be all remote learning days. We would have the first, three, I think we said, the first three would be regular snow days. And then anything after that would be a remote learning day. If you remember, one of the years, I think it was my first year here, we were almost into July.
Yes.
So we would do it so we would be able to get out, so parents could plan. That's the other thing I got from parents. I can't plan anything. We don't know when to go on vacation, if we have to change them. So if we said there'd be no more than 3 snow days, then at the very least, the parents could say, "Okay, that day, there's gonna be nothing after that."
Well, that's really helpful too, because a lot of parents work, so they're looking for camps to put their kids into, and they don't necessarily know. So that would be, that's a great compromise.
So another thing related to that, I just mentioned, is this sneak preview. I started to do this study on the amount of learning time lost due to long days, and I've had the principals start to look at the temperature of those buildings. In fact, one of the days, what the hot day, I think it was on that Tuesday, in one of the classrooms, and BES was 98 degrees, and I don't, there's no learning going on, it's that hot. So we're looking at the possibility of putting some kind of air conditioning in both of those buildings. We're looking at we're trying to factor how much time roughly is learned, how much instructional time is lost during the year. We estimate it's around a month of learning time is lost. Not as much in the spring, but in the fall, some very hot days. So we started to do
Specifically lost to heat specifically.
lost heat.
Not to cold.
No, I mean, we don't even think about that because we've got heating systems, so we never, the buildings are always warm. We always say when it's warm, oh, it's just a couple of days here, a couple of days there, but it actually amounts to a lot of time. And, we think it's roughly, and again, we're gonna start crunching the numbers. A student who enters kindergarten, by the time they get out, it's roughly about 6 months of learning time over that period. We'll get it more exact, and we'll get some research on it, but, so just a sneak preview, we'll probably see that coming down the line.
So I heard no snow days in Michigan.
There's a time that likes to snow,
That's
and in fact, I got,
Never sled, I mean, yeah.
no, I'm glad we could have one, we get a letter from the fourth grader, and then a letter from the entire seventh grade class complaining, so I'm glad we get them one snow day.
Yeah.
That's all I have, unless you have any questions.
Well, questions?
Thank you.
All right, moving into the business office. Conrad.
Good evening. So the first item on my report, we need the school committee to approve contract for curriculum materials. The procurement laws of the state allow us to have 3-year contracts without obtaining approval, needing to obtain approval, but to go beyond that, we need school committee approval, governing board approval, which for us is a school committee. So this is kind of a no-brainer. We're basically spending a couple $100 more to extend it 3 years. It's just kind of the way they've structured it. They really don't want to offer us a 3-year option. This is materials we anticipate is going to be well used over that 6-year period. So this is a business item 3-year vote later on. If there's no questions, I'll move on to the next one. Second item is the regional transportation reimbursement. I'm requesting that you authorize Jeff and I to direct a portion of the regional transportation revenue that we received from the state to this new revolving fund that you voted and approved last year. And we actually deposited $50,000 in it last year. It has to be spent the following year. So to the extent that we have the capacity to put it into this fund is beneficial. So we just are requesting your authorization to do that, and we'll determine how much based on what the budget capacity is at the end of the year. But I'd estimate it would be less than 50,000 this year. And there's some background there for your reference on the laws governing the fund.
What's the intent of those funds to be used for?
To cover transportation costs. So as a regional, we get reimbursed for all of our students who travel more than 1.5 miles to school.
So it's for unexpected outside?
No, it's just if it's an incentive to regionalize, they give you regional transportation, but they don't reimburse us for all students. They reimburse us for students who travel more than 1.5 miles, which is the majority of students because of where Toronto is located. For the elementaries, it's probably closer to half. We've been putting this into the general fund as revenue, can't be spent when it goes to general fund. It's kind of a budget offset. But putting it into the revolving fund, it's a bit of a safety net in case we have unexpected transportation costs.
So it can only be used, regardless of what fund it's in, it can only be used for transportation, not everything.
Yeah, it can only be used for transportation, but use the word fungible, like, we have plenty of expenses in transportation. If I put this toward transportation, it's going to free up money somewhere else in the budget. The next item is, the next two items are items that are required to be approved annually by the school committee, and we kind of instituted these practices a couple of years ago. So one of them is I posted a list of all the student activity accounts for each of the 3 schools. In addition to what I listed, there's a business item to approve a new club at Tohoto. I think it's called the Decker Club. You see that. So that's not on the list, but they're requesting approval because it's a new club. So that's what that is. And these are clubs at each of the schools that students participate in, and some of them do fundraising. Put money in there to fund some of their activities. But the rules governing student activity funds require the school committee to authorize the accounts every year, even if it's the same. And then the revolving funds, it's similar. I've listed all the revolving funds, school choice, facility revolving fund, preschool revolving fund. Those are to be used. The purpose of those funds in the chart that I attached there shows what the intent and use of those funds are, and the limits that we recommend for those funds. So we're requesting that you approve those as well. The next item is more of an FYI at this point. It's the acceptance of grant awards. This is something that we have not been doing. We weren't collectively aware of it, but I came across it through some posts, on some training I came across on grants. So the school committee, there's actually a policy related to this about accepting grants and donations. I've showed you the format that I think that we should follow for Wellesley. And the amounts that we would receive typically are not known until the fall. So what I'd recommend is that we just present this information in the fall when we know the amounts, and we'll present it in the format that is the same as Wellesley's format. And at that time, we'll list the amounts and the uses of those funds for the general purpose of what Title I, 2A, et cetera is. Most of these grants are entitlement grants that we get every year. There may be other grants that we receive periodically, and we could update you on those as we receive them. So no questions, I'll keep going. We, at Berlin Memorial, hired Beacon Associates to complete a facilities assessment of the school. This is intended to help us guide our capital planning for the next several years. Initially, we kind of looked at like a 5-year term plan. And so this is kind of a standard report that firms like this do. It helps us buckets the needs of the facility into different categories and different priorities. And I think this is going to give us useful information to plan our capital needs over the next 5 years. I did just wanted to comment that the priority two items, we didn't have any priority one items, which are critical, like right away need to be done, which is good news. And I think indicates that we take care of our buildings. Priority two items, in total, they have an inflation factor too, and kind of soft costs is the way they do this. So, it's actually, the actual cost could be a little bit less. But it's 250,000 for the priority two items, and close to half of that is already authorized for the ceiling HVAC access at Berlin Memorial, which basically can't be maintained. Folks don't remember, but a consultant who was working on it fell through the ceiling, so we need to fix it. It's a safety issue. So really, for the next couple of years, per their report, there's not a huge amount of capital needs, which is great news. In priority three, it's a different thing. We need to think about how we address that. The primary things there are the roof and the HVAC system, but those are not immediate term things. We'll have time to think about how we address those.
What determines immediate impact?
I mean, if we had, leaking roof, if we had the heat didn't work, we had a safety issue. So they would be priority one if it's immediate. Priority two is something they,
I was more just thinking from you look at a roof thing and you see that those numbers across from it, right? And you just say to yourself, when do you start planning for that?
yeah, that's a good question. I wasn't necessarily going to address it now, but I do have.
No, I'm not, so I'm not one of the part that get, like, there's life left there or whatever, but again, it's cheap, big numbers, so when do you start planning for that? What is, that's really priority one and priority two things. I'm like, hey, building was fixed and we gotta work on a daily basis, but behind the scenes, you can't get hit with a number like that without preparation. So obviously though it's priority three in terms of need today, it's priority one in terms of budget planning for Berlin Memorial moving forward.
Right, no, I agree. I do think there's a mechanism to address that.
I'm not saying we should talk about it now, I'm just.
But the answer would be to set up a capital stabilization fund, to start to put money into it over time, and then when that work needs to be done, you have that capital stabilization fund to drop on.
So maybe those conversations though should start sooner or later.
I've broached it with the town administrator, if that was a good idea, but we haven't really talked the numbers yet.
But you're already talking about it.
Yeah, and this meeting, we're gonna have another meeting on this report in August, and we've invited officials from the town, we're gonna invite a school committee member from Berlin as well. I'm trying to not have.
That's cool.
So given that everything on this list will be addressed, or is there some decision making about, well, we're not gonna address that, it's not, like, I noticed there are many items on there about cracks, fixing cracks and then repainting walls, and many halls, many places. And, is it given that we'll do all those, or will any of those potentially just remain?
Well, I think unless there's a good reason, we pretty much do everything, and the priority two is not a lot of money. So I have a list. Why wouldn't we do it if it's on the list? When I get to like the roof, I mean, it's $1.4 million. What, it's not like it's all of a sudden we need to do it now. That's something that has a useful life. And if we maintain it well and do some repairs, we might not need to spend that. Like, those are harder decisions on when to do it. Because they base some of these on useful life. They don't want to wait for it to break. On the other hand, they don't want to repair it 3 years before it can be used for 3 to 5 more years. So, but I think a lot of the priority two items are, some of them are tedious small things that we have to check off, and maybe not as important, but, I mean, my thought would be that we work through priority two, we start planning for the priority three items, the two biggest being the, Jeff talked about air conditioning, maybe we kind of pair that together. If we can figure out a way to get some air conditioning and look at the HVAC at the same time, and maybe we could address that, some of that over time. And the roof is really big one, and we need to think about a strategy to build one for that.
Yeah, you're gonna do a roof and air conditioning, you might as well build a brand new school at that point.
40 million
That's
versus,
what Berlin wants, you know.
I don't know, 40 million versus 2. I don't know.
Just saying, you're doing all those things already.
I'm a proponent of extending the life of the building and not building the building.
Those mini splits are pretty cool nowadays.
Would you say the estimates in this were like high estimates, given the current climate around construction and stuff, or moderate estimates? When we go out to bid, are we likely to hit these, or are they like have some buffer?
Well, I think they built in a 4% compounded annual inflation factor,
Okay.
and they put in a 30% contingency for soft costs and administration.
Yeah, I saw that.
But if we have, like, there's some issues going on right now, with materials and
Yeah.
availability of things. I mean, I hope that that's kind of a temporary thing, but,
Okay.
you know,
So they didn't factor that in necessarily.
they factored in what information they had at the time of improvement, so I don't think they're anticipating that they're going to 6% inflation or something like that.
Yeah.
But they did factor in 4%.
Some of those items were expensive. Okay.
If you need, these are estimates based on the best information you have.
Yeah, and then you go out to bid later and get several bids, I assume, on these.
We'll request to, yeah, and typically for these types of things, you get you know, a few bids at least. There's a lot of companies that do HVAC and roofs. So it's a good roadmap for us, and if anybody has questions offline they want to ask, I'm happy to go through it, but I think it's a good start for us. And we'll probably have to do it at Boylston at some point, but I think we want to kind of digest it a little bit more and be comfortable how we're going to use it. Maybe do that in 2
Yeah.
years.
I'm glad it was done.
Can I ask you one question, Rob?
Sure.
Was there any discussion about the gym floors now that those were used for lunch?
The gym floors are,
And I mean,
they're usually, the surf, aren't they?
to be resurfaced, I just didn't know if that was discussed, because I know they were,
We have that in our operating budget, so I don't think we have the actual floor to be replaced, but we have, we do have the operating budget to do the resurfacing, annually. Are you talking about like a full replacement?
no, I just think resurfacing of the floor, I mean, I just know I was in there today. And it-
Oh, Tohoto.
Yeah, or even, I know from Berlin as well, on that one as well, when the resurfacing will be done.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that is done annually. I don't know if it's in our operating budget or if it's paid for.
I think it's done every 3 years, I know, to be honest.
Okay.
I don't know, I just was looking through your slides, yeah, I didn't see the gym floor, I know she's lunches were in there, and she was on that, that's all.
Yeah, it's taken more wear and tear than it normally does, definitely. It's not a typical year.
Yeah.
We'll go look at the end of the year condition and if we need to do something more frequently, but I think for what we have to do in those, it's not too expensive. Replacing the whole floor would be very expensive, but the resurfacing and relaxing is it's built into our operating budget.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, and the last item is, there's some unpaid balances to the district for preschool debt. There's a little bit for unpaid lunch balances. Even though it's free, people can have some balances from prior to when it was free. And in some cases, there's a la carte items. If you buy those, you have to purchase those. You have to pay for those. That's not part of the free program that the federal government's reimbursing. So what we'd like to do, don't know that we need permission to write out the balances, but we want to be transparent about it. It's been a very difficult year. We want to reach out to families and ask that they make a contribution, whatever contribution they can towards the balance. And then we draw a line and we move forward from this year. We write out the balance that they can pay, but we also at the same time seek donations from the community. We put something in our newsletter I know some people when they're graduating have unpaid lunch balances. Angela, for example, sorry, I didn't know this, but somebody might have decided to pay unpaid lunch balance and put it towards student debt. And so, you know, if it sounds okay, we'd like to put something in the newsletter. Soliciting some donations, I think across preschool and school lunch, it might total about $5,000, which is high for us. It's not high relative to most communities. You know, we talked about equity this year, removing barriers for student access to the programs. Talked to Jeff about this. We did not want to deny people access to the preschool program. We felt like this year particularly, it was important. We feel like it's the right thing to do this year. And also feel like it kind of is a good way to just put the year behind us, draw the line, help some families out. You know, if we have to write up a little bit, it's a little bit less money in preschool or school lunch revolving fund. You know, I think our thought is so be it. We're better off doing that and moving on, not saddling some families with these debts that they're carrying.
I assume if you get an excess of what you need, that it gets rolled over into the current year's assistance, or what would you do?
I think that what I would do is if we create this fund for debt relief, that we keep it as a donation fund, and if it happens in the future, we have the ability to access it for that purpose. I don't know if we're going to get that much money. If we did, it'd be fantastic. I know some other districts have something like this where they have I don't know what they call it, but it's basically for helping with balances. And, you know, longer term, you know, maybe could be brought into something that's more like an equity fund that could help pay field trips or other things like that. But for now, we just wanted to focus on this specific issue.
Thank you.
And so I request that you approve us soliciting the donations. I don't think we need permission for approval of the write-outs, but if anybody has any concerns, it would be good to know that. Otherwise, we plan to, you can reach out offline if you want, otherwise we plan to see what we can collect and then spread the balances and move forward with a clean slate next week. Questions or Bob?
Thank you, Bob. Do we have an update for an evaluation?
Yeah, you just what I said earlier was that the school committee self-assessment results report will be coming to the committee. I think August, if we have one on the agenda, August or September.
Yeah, I just one of the things, Susan, when I talked to Susan, she mentioned another positive for pushing back the vote on the subcommittees was Susan felt like her and Lori had some things to complete. She wanted to complete some of that stuff before we made process, so I was policy and subcommittee stuff. So that was another reason why we felt made sense just put the brakes on and move it on. Do we have any updates, anyone on our school committee goals? School committee goals of, like other goals, have faced their own challenges this year. I think that moving forward, coming out of this stuff and with a new school committee and some reorganization, I think streamlining the goals and simplifying a little bit and maybe tailoring them around a couple of the major topics that you know, Susan and I collaborated a couple times, just talking about it, but I think it's, you know, one thing we didn't do this year either was launch Dorothy for a workshop this year, so really that's good value in the school committee goals get built quite often. So it's a 3-year sport, hopefully they'll be able to take on a new invigorated learning. Susan, do you have an update on the closest 3 house scholarship?
Yeah, asking for a vote, I think it's listed as a vote. A vote on this proposal for, this is the second time, last time moving forward, we decided to take it back to the drawing board, so this is a revision of last month's proposal for situating the Moses Reed Tyler Scholarship Committee at the Berlin Memorial School. And that the principal would oversee appoint a group to evaluate the applications and to come to some recommendations for the school committee. And that the school committee would provide a liaison that would help support that work. And that involves, just so they don't have to be consuming their time with making photocopies of applications and anonymizing those applications, et cetera, communicating with the lawyers, et cetera. So this proposal details what the Berlin Memorial School principal would be responsible for and what the school committee liaison would be responsible for. I believe that Jeff Brown is by the principal and we've got agreement that this will work. So I think this is what we can look forward, unless there are questions or suggestions from the committee.
Questions? Okay, thank you for the update. Work behind that. Okay, we're now moving to business items, portion of our agenda. I am going to, I thought I had already pulled this off, but I guess I didn't. I was thinking we should, as a committee, hold early retirement incentive bill off until it's actually approved in legislation. We have something to actually vote on. I think we're prematurely, I think we talked about this last meeting, and we moved into this meeting, but I still think there hasn't been any updates, any changes. Everything's evolving too much, there's too many variables. I just think we should put this off for a vote until the actual legislation is approved.
Okay. All right, my only concern will be if the legislature passes it during the summer and teachers won't get moving.
What's that in
Yeah, we're going to do August.
the?
What's our August meeting date, 14th or something like that? So we should pick it up. Okay.
I guess it's easy to, more than one citizen to the legislation.
Yeah. Good.
Okay, next item, can I please have a motion to approve the school committee meeting dates for the 2021/2022 school year?
So moved.
Second. Lori, any questions? Everybody get a chance to take a look? Open the old calendar. All those in favor? Opposed? I'm sorry, I was an aye as well, I apologize. Opposed? Hearing none. Then please have a motion to approve the Moses Reed Tyler Scholarship Committee changes as presented by Susan previously.
So moved.
Second. Mike, questions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Could I please have a motion to accept donation of $574.26 to BES from Eagle Scout Jeffrey Wilcox?
So
Is that Julie? Lori said that, sorry. Mike?
thank you.
Obviously, thank you very much, Jeff. Awesome. Any other questions? Concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Could I please have a motion to approve contract for curriculum materials as presented by Mr. Connery previously? Thank you, Keith.
Second.
Second, Susan, thank you very much. Questions, concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, could I please have a motion to approve for approval of the annual approval of revolving funds as presented by Mr. Conrad?
So,
Susan? Mike, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Could I please have a motion for the annual approval of student activity accounts as presented? Mike, Julie, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Could I please have a motion for approval of regional transportation reimbursement fund deposit as presented by Mr. Conrad? Mike, thank you.
I'll second.
Lori?
Yeah.
Thank you both. Questions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Could I please have approval to seek and accept donations from community members for unpaid balances owed to district as presented by Mr. Conrad earlier? Thank you, Mike. Lori? Julie? You sound the same. Questions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
J is a repeat.
J is a repeat. So, J, thank you very much. Could I please have a motion to accept the donation of $600 from Memorial Tree and Plaque for Matthew Phillips?
So,
Susan, thank you. I'm sorry, Lori, thank you. Susan, thank you as well. Any questions or comments?
it was great.
Excellent. Thank you very much to those families for donating the funds and time as well. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Could I please have a motion to accept donation of $3,000 for water filling stations from Tohoto PTO?
Second.
Keith, Julie, any questions? Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, if they just cover the air conditioners, we'd be really. I do have a comment for the rest of the first reads. The first, the August meeting, we just.
Can I, hold on, we didn't vote on that yet. Did your question on that particular PTO?
Oh, sorry.
No, it's not? Okay, I had, Keith made a motion, Julie second. Any more questions on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
The meeting dates we just approved, the next meeting is August 31st. That's after your resignation. And you were going to share that.
Correct. Second.
I just want to, normally you have the first August meeting is an as needed, and the second August meeting, the school's getting going is the regular meeting. So they're kind of flip flopped in August.
I thought you told me the first meeting was the envelope.
The first meeting would be the 17th, if you so choose to do that as chair.
I mean, I can do this one of two ways. I'm okay staying till first.
Yeah.
I will be there, I will be there, I will be at the August meeting. So I'm committed to that. So it is up to the committee if we would like to keep the August 31st date, but I will also entertain the idea if people prefer to be the August 17th date.
Last year, we met
We
early.
can flop the as needed on the calendar.
We had COVID concerns, all the stuff going on last year, so we met earlier. I could imagine that we would use the August 17th meeting if stuff started to crop up and the state started sending.
And that'd be a bad idea to switch it, and have the other meeting the 31st.
It's just a matter of what people's summer plans are.
Correct.
So,
Okay.
sorry?
No, we just, you said summer plans, but my mind went somewhere else. On the 17th. So we should do the 31st. Because you're gonna do reorganizations, that should be.
So, do you want
So I
to send your
will,
resignation letter?
I will change my resignation and make it the 1st of September.
Okay. All right, good, thank you. for clarifying.
That's Okay, the remainder of items in were first reads, we don't need executive session, we don't need the open session again. Here now, the next meeting is August 31st. Okay, that's it. Anything else before we close?
Yeah,
Congratulations, everybody.
yeah, I was about to say congratulations to all the teachers and,
Yeah.
and the whole staff, and everybody for, one hell of a year. And of course, Jim.
If everybody knows, Jeff and I talked about, there wasn't anything on the agenda like pertinent to the principals for tonight. They were on the agenda to be here, Jeff, and it was really just pertinent. We felt like with the end of the year and everything else going on. So,
Thank you, Dave.
good job, Jeff, for,
We appreciated that.
yeah, sure, so, thanks, Jeff, for recommending that. So, okay, cool. Could I please have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. All's in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Oh.